Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. We're also on YouTube and BitChute as Speaking Podcast. I also have the Awakening Podcast, the Learn Polish Podcast, and the Meditation Podcast, and all can be found on roycollin.com. Today, my guest, all the way in, well, we all know the sleepless in Seattle, but you're not sleepless. Please welcome Brett Hill.
Hi, thank you.
So I suppose the first thing you can do is introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. Well, I am a mindfulness and communications coach, specializing in helping people land in their authentic voice and learn to connect through their storytelling and through their messaging to whoever they're speaking to, including public speakers, audiences, or even in group meetings, business meetings, one-on-one, even casual conversations, so that people can have, and I think my byline is like, have great conversations every day, right? How to elevate our normal expectations from our conversations to having connections with people that are really deeply nourishing and satisfying. Because I think we're kind of missing that these days.
Definitely. And I always like to know your journey. And I know that because, just after researching, you were doing the debating. So I'd like to go into the debating. But prior to that, how were you? What way did you get, from youth to get into public speaking? Let's say.
Well, I actually started. It turned out I had some kind of a knack for speaking in front of crowds because I started doing it in high school and junior high, and so I was one of the kids who was always in band and speech. So I was that kind of a guy, right? Instead of the sports side of thing, and so I became very familiar with standing up in front of people and speaking. And I was also an actor when I was a younger man and musician. So I had a lot of stage time. I was like in front of audiences a lot. Well, when I went to college, I thought I was going to be an actor, but I started looking around where I was and I'm going, there's no future in that where I was, which was in the middle of the United States. And so instead I started looking around and I was looking for something that was, I'm sort of like this, what's the most important thing that a person can do sort of guy, really taking that seriously. And I landed in sort of an epiphany one day where I thought the most important thing, the thing that is really limiting the quality of our lives and what we can achieve as a species, as humanity, is communications. Like if we can't talk effectively, then how can we ever have a good relationship, a good business, a good solve a pandemic, build a city? How can we do any of these things, particularly the complicated things, unless we can communicate well? And so I got a degree in interpersonal communications. And that really opened my eyes to what the heck is going on between two people, because there's so much more than meets the eye unless you're really looking and really listening. And there's so little attention to what that means and what that opens up. What then becomes possible is fairly profound. Right after that, excuse me, the technical world started just to blow open, and I had a knack for computers, and that seemed to carry me for a while. And computers became the thing, and I seemed to be the only guy around who knew anything about them. And eventually I got hired by Microsoft. And the reason I did is because I had this public speaking background and I was good with computers. And so those things combined to help me be a good communicator about technical matters. And so I wound up in a role they call a technical evangelist, uh, sometimes called technical marketing. And so what that is you get hired by a company to go around and tell people why their technology is important, but to do it in a way that connects to what matters to people. So you don't say, well, it's 10% faster. It's like, now you can get more done. You can be more productive. You can spend less time. And so you relate the benefit rather than the feature. So it's a feature benefit discussion. Now that's all wrapped up in the notion of storytelling. And so I presented on technical stages all around the world in some pretty big conferences. And so this was, again, an extension of my public speaking experience. Now, parallel to that, I was still this guy who kind of wanted to know like what's really going on inside and outside. And so I was studying meditation and mindfulness and had a big spiritual practice. And so I had established a meditation center in Dallas called the Quest Institute, where I was teaching meditation that I had learned from this particular school. And it was really profound. And it was meshing with my other work. And eventually I wound up studying a form of somatic psychology called Hakomi and some other forms of that, plus some movement like contact improvisation. Um, and all of that really landed in how to be present with another person in a very intentional way so that I could connect and hear what's going on in a big picture way. And so over the years, this has kind of morphed into this notion that there's a way we can be with each other that changes the conversation. And that conversation is a better conversation than what we would just normally have. And it doesn't take that much to make that kind of an effect change. And that's what I call my work, the language of mindfulness. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Brilliant. I love that. And I mean, of all the courses to do, I think that's a fantastic one because I was very late getting to being comfortable on stage. And, I think it's like about 4 years now is all that I've been, going to Toastmasters and everything. So it's brilliant to do a course in that.
Yes, I heard a little bit about your story in one of your podcasts. Pardon me. And and how you decided I've got to be a public speaker to do what I want to do. It's kind of like not where I came from. And so I had fortunately had quite a bit of coaching and training leading up to me actually being on a professional stage. And at high school you get to goof off a bunch, right? So it's kind of like whatever. In fact, I sort of became, for some reason, I became the MC, the de facto MC for our high school events. All the plays and productions. And if there was a school event, we say, well, we'll get Brett to MC. And so I'm like the guy at the podium going, and now we'll have whatever. So I don't know how I even got that role, but I was always being called on to do that. And it was kind of, it was kind of fun. I get to get out of class and I get to be in front of everybody, and that never hurt.
No, brilliant. And I know that you were doing debating as well, because like I've just done some debating on the Toastmasters, and I really enjoy it, and it's kind of listening. Just wondering what your tips and tricks are, and do you feel it has helped you in your
With
career?
debate? Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good question. The thing with debate these days is, well, debate really, the structure of debate hasn't changed that much, but it's more like you have to really listen to another person's argument. And if you're kind of looking for the structure of what you want to do, remember always that people's emotions are going to rule what they actually kind of think. You think sometimes it's an objective problem. If I can just prove these things with my facts, then I'll win. But it's not like that. Oftentimes it's the person that they like or they feel the best about. And so to come across authentically is to come across powerfully. And so my coaching always these days is land in your authentic voice. And if you speak from that place, it doesn't matter. That really helps you if your argument is second best. You know what I mean? And so that gives you your very best chance. So if you have a better argument too, you're certainly going to stand out that way. So it's really about authenticity and connecting. Now, of course, with debate, sometimes you have to argue points of view that you don't really agree with, depending on the side of the card you pick up, right? And so you have to find something in there that you do connect to, some point that's, truth, justice, it's really not the detail, but I'm all about the truth. And the truth is, and you're using that in a way to support an argument. So it's a little bit of a not congruent, but that's just the art of debate. You're really discussing the craft, right? I'm going to create an argument and try to be persuaded about something I don't really believe in, but I do like argumentation, and so it's about the craft of that. So if you can align with that, then that can help in those scenarios.
No, definitely. I find it, if it's something that I truly believe in, it's a lot easier. But if it's something that, yeah, okay, you're on this side, you're on that side, you can still do it, but it's not the same because
No, it's
you're
not
not
the
in
same.
flow. It's not
No,
from your
it's
heart.
true.
You're just
And
kind of,
and you're having this incongruence. Why and the truth is that I support the death penalty because and you're going, no, I don't. What the heck? And that's going to come through in your voice. And regardless of where you land on that particular discussion, when you're speaking passionately in a way to support something you don't believe in, that's going to come through in some way to those who are paying attention. And that's really the key, is like, are you paying attention? Because a lot of people are able to say a lot of things that they don't really believe and be convincing.
mm, yeah, no, exactly. And like when you're doing touring for, say, Microsoft, because a lot of the time people doing a technical speech, it's they don't get the energy going and everything.
No.
So what's the tricks? Because there is people that are in that boat and they want to try to be able to connect with the audience, because sometimes not all audience members are technical as well, and you have to kind of break it down to a way that they'll understand.
Well, right. And so when you're doing technical presentations or you have a lot of detail to get through, you have to remember to bite-size things according to your audience. So you have to be very careful to manage the complexity based on the skill set of your audience. And some of the presentations I did, if I did a very superficial presentation, they would have blown me out on the speaker reviews because they're deep technical audiences. And so they want the acronyms, and the suppositions are that they already know all the basic stuff. So you need to provide some nuanced insight, or you're wasting their time. And so you want to have some jewel that is not obvious, that is powerful and presents well. And that's what you kind of hinge your whole thing around. So with technical presentations, very frequently there's a demo involved. And so if you can have a demo of your thing, and the demo should not be, and it needs to spend time to make your demo visually apparent and obvious. Very frequently I'll see large screens in somebody's computer screen, and the demo that's happening is like in 1/16 of the portion of the view. It's like, now notice over in here, this little spinning thing. That's because we just enabled this new, it's going to go. It's kind of like, okay, but the voice and the energy is all about 1/32 of the screen that you're seeing. No, no, no. Zoom in on that thing, make it big, tie a trigger to it that goes bazoomba, make it a visual splash. You know, try to bring what's happening face forward so that it's really clear enough. I swear I saw like I've seen presentations like a calculation happening, and the big change was that the calculation could actually occur. It's like a whole new thing. And so this guy has a spreadsheet and he pushes a button and a number changes, and that's supposed to cause the audience to erupt. Well, obviously it was a big letdown because it wasn't very exciting. And you have to make it exciting. And if you look at it and it's not exciting, there's work to do. And then the other part of that is, so there's the visual component, and then there's the storytelling component. You have to make it relevant to people's lives. You have to not just say, oh, we had a whole new class of APIs or cloud services. You have to say, why does this matter? And so now you can now you can have more security. Are you tired of worrying about whether or not you're going to be hacked? Well, now you don't have to worry because of these things. So, oh my God, I don't want to worry. How can I worry less through technology? Here's how. Let me show you. And then you do that in a visually appealing way, you're going to win.
And how long typically would have you been on stage when you were touring around?
Those were often 30 to 45 or 50-minute presentations.
Would you use like how would you prepare yourself? Because sometimes you have maybe because some stages you can have like the teleprompter in front of you so you can look at it rather than having to turn around. But
Yes, exactly right.
so
Yeah.
just how you prepared yourself, basically.
Well, I would always go look at the room before I speak. And so when you're doing some of these conferences, there's like 50 different rooms. Some of the big ones, there's like a lot of rooms. They're like conference centers in like Orlando or Houston or New Orleans, or mostly in the United States where I spoke. Um, and so, or, you're overseas, I'm in some hotel, and I would go look at the room, see where the displays are. Maybe there's one, maybe there's two, maybe there's more, how big they are, because that has an impact on how far back is the audience, what's the sound like. I always get a read on the room environmentally, because that was part of, actually I learned to do that because of my training. And I would go in, I would go, what's it feel like in here? Is it bright? Is it dark? Is it musty? Is it smelly? Is it temperature okay? And I would try to actually, put myself in this seat of the audience and go, what's their experience like? And try to, if I could do anything about that, then I would. I don't do anything about it, but I mean, I incorporate some, let that inform me to make some changes if necessary. If the screen is behind me, then you have to be really clear to not just be constantly turning, looking at your screen. And that's why very frequently there's a screen behind you, but you have your laptop in front of you or wherever you're present, and you can see what's there. And so you reference that instead of behind you.
Yeah.
And so you want to be sure to, be face forward and be connecting, always looking at the people, getting a sense of the room. Are you losing them? Did they understand what you mean? And don't be afraid to be yourself, be authentic and be real, and share with them your own journey, because people like stories. If you can make it about stories, everybody wins.
And you mentioned about connecting with the audience, because especially in doing a technical presentation, like if you're reading the audience, because I've noticed a lot of people don't. One, first of all, with the presentations, they're talking to the back. They're watching the back of your head, because a lot of people just turn around and they're reading, and there's been I can't understand why people do that, but a lot do it. But the other thing is, you mentioned about connecting with the audience, and you can read. I mean, I've done that. You can adjust, because they're either not getting it, or they might have took it wrong, that they get offended or something like that, and you can adjust. So how do you actually read? Do you look specifically, or are you just kind of looking at body language as well?
All of it. I'm looking at it. I'm just sort of like, I'm looking at the audience. I'm looking at specific. What you'll find is that there are certain people in the audience that are kind of like your visible meters, right? Certain people are very expressive and very visibly engaged or not engaged. And your eye will kind of automatically see those people, because they're the ones that are giving you information. And so if you look around for who can be my, like old school meters, right? Like 0, this is boring, 10, this is exciting. And they're like, yeah, okay. So are those people like lighting up, or are they bored to tears? And what you're really looking for is, of course, if they're disengaged, how can you engage them? Then you need to liven up your energy and start moving. That's the other thing people don't do, is they don't use the space that they have to engage. I'm always on the edge of the stage if I can be. I'm standing there, like, not always, because you got to be behind the podium, but if I can, I'm moving out, and I'll walk out into the audience if I can. And I've even been known to walk up and down the aisle, if there is an aisle, because I want them to have to track me, because that means their attention is there, right? And also, I'm like using the space. It's like, so if you can get in addressing, like, now I'm speaking to you guys, and now I'm speaking to you guys, and I'm looping you all in to my conversation. I want you all to be a part of this thing. And this is me and you, man. We're having a talk here. And if I'm not clear, you got to let me know. And I need you to let me know. And I'll ask, is that clear? Any questions? Let me know if this isn't. I'll ask those questions. If I'm not coming across, and if I know I'm not coming across, you can tell, because people just, they start looking at their phones, and they're like, whatever. And And in that point, you have to make a decision, like, are you going to keep doing what you were doing, or are you going to shift it up? And you better shift into another gear if you're really losing them.
It all comes back to the communication, because you're communicating with them and you're actually paying attention to what's going on. And like, just with coming close, because I constantly kind of watch what people are doing, and I've noticed that when people are coming close or sitting on the edge of this, you're connecting closer with the audience. It's like we're together instead of the guy that stays way behind. Because some
Yeah.
people, even though they're on stage, there's still people that are very shy, and you know it because they stay back and they sometimes hide behind the podium.
Right. You have to invite them into your world. You have to include, it's like, come on in, we're all in this together. Right. I start with, we're all here. You, I have a TEDx talk that I'm planning on giving sometime. It was supposed to be last year on mindfulness and language. And he got canceled because of COVID. But as a result of that, I had it all written out. And in it, it says, it's like, we're, of all the things you could have done today, go on a world tour, finish your masterpiece, you chose to be here. Right. And so it starts with, we're all here for a reason. So let's just make that moment matter. You're here to hear what I've got to say, and I think it's important and interesting and useful and valuable to you, and I really want you to hear it. And if you're coming from that place, I really want you to hear this authentically. That's going to be in your voice, and it's going to create a sense of curiosity and openness. Okay, so I mean, they got themselves up into the seat, so they wanted to be there, right? So all you have to do is show up and go, and I want you to be here too, and we're going to have this moment, and it's going to be great. And if you're coming from that place, you've got a big part of the mindset one. The only problem is you have to be sure to deliver on that. And this is where the mindfulness part is. You have to be mindful of, what's my experience now? Oh, I'm experiencing fear because they're starting to pull back. Well, you can't pull back too. Oh my God, I'm going to blow this. You have to go, wait, and don't be afraid to say, look, I'd like to make sure this is the most useful information that can be. If this isn't on point, what do you want to know? And I'll make it about what they want to know. And that will certainly light up certain segments of the audience who are sitting on questions that's valuable to them. And one of the most interesting things I've learned in group dynamics is that there are no single questions. And what I mean by that is, if you're in a room of 100 people and one person asks a question, there's 25, 40 other people in that room that are sitting with the same question. And so they're asking on behalf of other people. And so me, as a speaker or presenter or group facilitator, I'm listening to what I call the voice of the room. So what's out there? What is in the in kind of woo-woo language? What's in the group field? And is it curiosity, or is it, I'm frustrated because you're not really getting to what I wanted to know? And if so, we'll talk about that. I'm not afraid to go there.
Very good. And just just going back a small bit on the when you're looking at the audience, because some people mightn't realize, but sometimes you feel like a dazzled rabbit because the lighting, and you don't get to see the whole audience. Then
Well,
you have to look at the front kind of lines, basically.
that is so important. I'm really glad you mentioned that. And one of the things I tell people who are speakers who are afraid of public speaking is that they really, really, really need to go stand on a stage with bright lights before they do it for real. And maybe you get some home lighting or something, and you turn them up and you stand there, and it's so bright that you can barely see out. Because if your very first experience of that is just about before you speak, and you've had in your head that I'm going to be connecting to the audience, and you go out there, you can't even see the audience, that's going to really be a, whoa, wait, what kind of experience, right? And you have to be sure that that moment doesn't disrupt your groundedness in your ability to connect, even with an audience you can't really see that well. You have to just trust that your side of the equation. That's a big deal if you really literally can't see them. Normally you can find a few faces, and that becomes your anchor
Yeah,
in that case.
exactly. And I mean, it is right. Like, because a lot of people aren't aware of that. And, there's different techniques that people will tell you. Some are saying, look over their head so it looks like you're looking at them, or do the kind of M shape and everything. And if somebody's going in without the preparation or realizing that it's going to be boof in your face.
Well, it's really true. I mean, it's a kind of a rush whenever you step on stage. Like, whoa, I'm standing in front of all the 500 pair of eyes looking at me, and like, that's different than being in the cafeteria a minute ago. And so there's also this way I've rehearsed and practiced this notion of transitions, right? And we have lots of transition. Boy, this is really a big deal. I talk about this in this book that I'm writing and in this work that I do. Learn to honor the transitions that you have throughout your day, and that's prep for whenever you have these big transitions. So I step on stage, whoa, how does this feel different? It feels really different. But instead of like, oh, it's more like, oh, wow, okay, it's bright. The sound is different. I'm elevated above everybody else. Now there's all these lights, there's all this gear. What's this feel like? And yeah, it can feel nervous or it can feel exciting and engaging, right? And if you do it enough, it starts to feel comfortable, but that's just our nervous systems. If you haven't done it, then like I said, there's nothing like getting on a literal stage, even in front of an empty room, and standing there and looking out and going, what does this feel like? What's going on in me now? It feels scary, and start walking around the stage and looking out and going, what's it feel like to be in conversation with this room, in rapport with this 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 feeling that I'm having. And that's really super important for your nervous system, for you to build in the neural network that you need, that will help you whenever you do that for real. Because then your nervous system has a reference point. Oh yeah, I know what this is like. I've been here before. This isn't entirely new. Really critical work to do that.
And like, I mean, obviously you've been on stages all over the world, and I remember first time I had to wear one. I don't know what they're called, the headpieces with the in your,
Mm-hmm.
and because sometimes people are kind of with the puffing sound, so they
Yeah.
put it to your chin. But there's different types. There's the holding the mic and everything. So you've experienced them all, I'm assuming, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I mean, because I've had so much stage experience in my early, you know, adult years, yeah, microphones, and of course the wraparound microphones, and all different kinds of things. You have to be very conscious of that. And there's plenty of stories about technical conferences where people have put on these wireless mics and then, you know, and wound up having them on still like after the show, and they're still piping through, and they go to the bathroom and they start saying things maybe they shouldn't be saying, and people, everybody hearing. There's plenty of those stories around. And so you have to be conscious of those kinds of things. And it's just a matter of learning to manage the gear. But it is different if you're standing here like this, because one of my hands is out here to do stuff, and I might need it for demos, and that's a real problem, because then what do you do? So that's just a poor setup, right?
Yeah.
Now tick 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 tick. You can't believe me because I don't have the microphone there. And then okay, now what you just saw is like, that's really, they shouldn't do that to you. Um, but if you're doing a technical demo, but if you have a handheld microphone, then you have to learn how to use it. And it can be too close. And I've seen a lot of good talks just go into the shadows because someone's like, well, the thing is, and the microphone's out here,
Yeah.
and it doesn't work. There's technical craft to this that get you have to master if you're going to be good at this.
And I think people should realize prior to going on what they're going to use, because a lot of people use hand gestures, and if they're holding the mic, even if they don't do that where they're actually putting their hands away, they're keeping the mic to their hand, they can't get the same thing. So they have to adjust their speech depending on the equipment that's going to be provided from.
Yes, and so one of the key things now that I'm thinking about this is one of the reasons I'm pretty comfortable kind of regardless of the mic situation is because if I don't have a mic, I can be pretty loud. And I've had a lot of coaching and I would suggest to your audience speakers, if you have never had coaching about how to project your voice to the back of a room without amplification, that's really good coaching to get because it helps you be in situations where the AV fails. I've been in lectures where, they're all a bunch of wireless and we've had other people's talks coming through the speakers in my room. And so it's kind of like, wait, what? It's not going to work. So I've just had to like turn them off. And so I'm standing on the stage using my opera voice. And so the thing is, you can, but fortunately, I've had some training in that, and I can sustain that for a while and not be as dramatic as I was just being, but project, literally just project your voice. But if you're kind of quiet and timid and you need this help and you depend on it, and that goes away, what are you going to do? Is that the end of the talk? Maybe. It's up to the people in the managing the room to get that right, but sometimes things don't work.
Like you mentioned, just the sound system from the other rooms coming through. Another thing that I've seen is if you've got a few different rooms, and sometimes they just have a partition. So you're
That's
doing a
right.
speech, and
Yeah.
next they're all cheering and shouting next door.
Oh my God, I know.
And you have to adjust to that because you can't
That's not optimal. It's kind of bad. I've been in talks where things have been a little serious. It's kind of like on the softer side of the humanity, and when we're doing talks on like relationships, whatever, and someone's coming up with this really kind of deep, relatable story about some struggle that they've been through, and the room's been really somber, and then all of a sudden, and we've got a comedian next door, and they're like laughing hysterically, someone's going, and then I got the news, it was terminal. Wow, coming from the other side, and everybody's like, wait, what? This is a real disconnect. And what can you do? You can just sort of let go, oh my God, and just kind of like lean into that a little bit and go, yeah, it's a cosmic joke, right? And that's the best you can do really in scenarios like that.
Exactly. It's like you said that you're doing 2 TEDx, but because of the COVID thing, so some people aspire to do the TEDx. How do you go about it? What was your tricks?
Oh, wow. Well, I spent quite a bit of time thinking about the message that I was going to have. And so my message is, okay, let me back up for a minute. TEDx, if you fill out the applications for speaker, the number one, not the number one thing, but the thing you've just got to nail is, what's your big idea worth spreading, right? That's the key line, right? What's your big idea? And so you need an idea that is slightly, at least interesting and unusual, that has some catch to it that's going to interest people. So the first thing you have to do, because if you're like a mindfulness guy like me, I put myself in the shoes of the person making the decision on who the speaker is. What are they looking for? So they're looking for somebody that's unique, that's going to give their audience a great experience. And so you need to be that person. So what can you do to be that person? So you need a unique story, and it can't be, they aren't really looking for, oh, my story, unless it's really an interesting story, like my life as a child soldier, which is a talk that is a powerful story. But usually it's not about, well, my path led me to some realization, but your story can be part of it. Now, in my case, I spend a lot of time on mindfulness as a language is my story. It's like mindfulness is normally, excuse me.
That's good.
Normally, mindfulness is something that you think of as doing a solo, you do by yourself. But I'm focusing on making it interactive. What happens when we have mindfulness between us, when we connect at a deeper way? How does that change the conversation? And trying to communicate that that's the value of what I'm going to bring to my talk. And then, so then there's so getting all of that done. And then there's the mechanics, like you go to the TEDx site, find um, events that you're interested in, find the link for the speaker application, fill out the form. Now, I actually wound up applying to a lot. I applied to like 50 TEDx's and before I got accepted. So it's sort of like writing a book, and sending it out, or a song, you get rejected a lot, but you will eventually, I hope, get accepted. And so I actually wrote a paper on this called TEDx 101 on the mechanics, a little bit of how I did all this. And so your audience can go and find it at, do you mind me saying? I don't think.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. languageofmindfulness.com/TEDx 101. So it's called TEDx 101. So it's languageofmindfulness.com/TEDx 101. And you can sign up there and get the PDF, and it has about 18 pages of how you can go about landing a TEDx talk. And the process that I use, because I went up with this spreadsheet and I'm like clicking through everything and which ones have I applied to. And there's certain information you're going to need, like you're going to need a video of you pitching your talk. Like, my idea is this, and and it needs to be heard because da, 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 da. And you need to have like a 1 minute and a 2 minute and a 3 minute version of that talk, because every TEDx is different. They're not templated except in the name and sort of the stage presentation, but each one's unique. And so there are a lot of them that you won't be able to apply to. Some of them are, for example, just for people at a particular school, or some of them are limited to particular region, like you have to be from the hometown that it's in. Others are on specific topics. Others don't take applications from speakers. They only invite speakers. And so there's a lot to sort out there.
No, and I mean what you said, because a lot of people, they're more thinking in the mindset, me, what I've got to offer, whereas you've reversed. And I think people should go back and listen to that again, because that's a key ingredient to the way to.
Absolutely. It's always, you have to always start with, remember, and my thing about mindfulness and communication, right? So I'm not all about, but I'm always dealing in who am I speaking to, the humanity of the other side of this conversation. And that has helped me so much in my life, immensely, and personally, professionally, in organizations, because, and it's not like I have to agree or support what they're doing. I can still connect to the humanity of people that I disagree with. Mostly. There are, I do have some lines there, but
I think you have to in life. And when you were actually not being accepted, do they give you feedback, or would you follow up to kind of?
No, it's just like, we carefully reviewed your application, and and we wish you the best. We feel like it's worthy of a TED Talk sometimes, but it's just not a fit for us this year or something. Please apply next year. The nice ones would give you something like that. Otherwise, they would just say, thank you for applying, but you were not selected. And that's,
And
so
like just getting into the mindfulness, because I'm something that I'm passionate about myself, and I think that whether it's debating, whether especially if you've got a mission in life and you're trying to get a message out and you're going to be attacked, because sometimes people don't like what you're doing and they're intentionally trying to throw you. I think by being mindful that you don't let your anger, you can keep calm, and by keeping calm, you've clear thoughts and you can still articulate what you're trying to do, even if you're being, if somebody's trying to distract you or throw an awkward question.
well, that's the whole point in a certain way. Is, well, it's not the whole point, but one of the key parts about mindfulness is that you become aware of what's going on, not only in the other, but let me put it like this. There's no way to be alert and attentive to other people in a refined and skillful way unless you're also alert to what's going on in you in a refined and skillful way. It's not all about, I'm going to take my relatively unconscious self and suddenly wake up to what's going on over there. You have to first attend to your own house. So the first part about mindful communication is mindfulness, which means you have to inside yourself have the capacity to know what is happening on purpose in the moment. And so when somebody says something to you that irritates you, you have to have something in you that goes, I feel irritated and I want to just bark back something reactively and push a button, push the pause button and go, yeah, that's what I want to do, but maybe that's not the best thing. Maybe there's another way. And to reflect on what that might be. And then once you've done all the hard, and it takes a while to create this capacity, I call it resilience, to not be reactive when you probably have just cause to be, and a lot of people would be. So rather than be reactive or defensive, well, that's not true. Well, the facts are, and well, I hear you, but you're wrong. Instead of being like argumentative, and there's nothing wrong with being argumentative. It's just that, is that what you want to be? Is that going to get you the results that you want to get? Is that the way you want to come across? And if the answer to all that is yes, then, you're making a decision then to be argued. The point is to make that decision consciously rather than to be unconscious about it.
Letting your emotions take over, basically.
And they will. Yeah. They will.
And how did you get, you start meditating to get into this? What's your process? What, because there's so many different things. Breath work, there's hundreds of different types of meditation. Just curious.
There are, yeah. Well, the
curious.
basic, it depends on who you are and the kind of thing that you respond to. The basic mindfulness meditation is super powerful and very broadly applicable. So, and it's all over the web. You can find them anywhere. I'm going to put one up on my website like this week, I think. And it's super simple. You just simply sit down and you tend to your breath. You focus on your breathing. You give yourself 5 or 6 minutes just to settle down, because we're organic systems. You can't just flip on the switch and say, now I'm meditating. You can go, remember I talked earlier about transitions, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a transition here. So I'm focusing on the world. I have to disconnect. It's kind of like a jet engine turbine. You turn it off and it still spins for a while, right? Well, it's the same thing with our brains. You sit down and they still spin for a while, even though I'm not putting anything into it. And the task of mindfulness is to just simply pay attention to your breath or some physical aspect. Why? Because the body is always in the moment. Now, that's one of those phrases that you could underline and put on your wall and carry around with you because it's super powerful. The body is always in the moment. And so whenever you feel like you're out of control or nearly there, tune to your breathing, tune to some experience that you're having in the moment. And that will help you disconnect from the intensity of an emotional flare-up. You can't get there always, but you can with practice, or you can get there more with practice. And that's why you do this. You practice on your breath. Now, you're not just focusing on your breath. Well, you are primarily just focusing on your breath. And then you're going to have thoughts because we're not trained. So we're just going to have, you're going to have thoughts come up. Oh, I got to do this. I got to do my taxes, or I need to figure out what I'm going to do about the broken dishwasher, or whatever's going on in your life. That's just going to happen. And the thing is, you just notice, oh, I'm thinking about the dishwasher. I'm thinking about my tax. And you say, okay, fine. I'm having those thoughts. So anything that's going on, I'm having feelings that this is stupid. I'm having feelings that I'm impatient. I'm having feelings that I don't like this. You just name it. Oh, I'm having these feelings. Going back to your breath. Now that process of noticing and then coming back, noticing, and now I'm going to be here. I'm thinking about tomorrow. Now I'm going to be here is a muscle, a neurological muscle that you need to practice when you're not under stress. And that's the very definition of mindfulness, which is I'm choosing to be attentive in the moment, right now, on purpose and without judgment. So I'm terrible at this. I can't really do this very well. If you buy into that, oh, I feel bad about that, then suddenly you're into judgment. Otherwise, you can say, oh, I'm having thoughts that I'm not very good at this. See, there's a big difference. One is I'm having this thought and that's who I am. Another is, oh, I'm someone who's just having this thought. Huge difference. One is identified and one is just, I'm having an experience. When you can separate from that, instead of when you're on stage, you say, oh, I'm having an experience of being nervous. It's not like, oh my God, I'm nervous and I'm going to freak out. I'm freaking out. I'm not going to. Instead, it's like, I'm noticing I'm nervous. Coming back to your experience. You see how that works? And then, but you have to practice when you're not under stress. I always say this all the time. If you want to be mindful when you're under stress, you have to practice when you're not. And so that little meditation seems so simple. And you just do that for 5 or 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. You have to do it enough to make a difference. Now, some people, they just can't meditate. They just can't. Either they have trauma or their minds just don't calm down. And there are physical things you can do for those people. They can take walks and connect to beauty, right? So the important thing, if you do that, is just find something you like, the sky, right? Or a painting or a picture, and let that feel good, and do that a lot. And those are mindful moments. If you say, I see that flower around here and it's spring and the flowers are coming out, it's amazing. So there's a lot of, oh my God moments, right? That's so amazing. Just notice that and choose to just be in that experience for a little bit more. Instead of just going, oh, that's pretty, and going on, you go, oh, that's pretty. Wait, I'm having one of those moments. Yeah, that is really nice. Let yourself connect to that experience, relax a second, and see what happens. That's a mindful choice. I'm choosing to be present with my experience in the moment. And that's what it's all about.
I think, unfortunately, today, majority of people, they're glued to their smartphones, and like you missed the butterfly flying around and just being looking at the birds and just, whether it's a bee or whatever, just paying attention to nature, unfortunately. So what I would say is put your phone away, because then you'll be more present to what's actually happening around you.
Super important. I mean, I use in my video, I use a video. I mean, when I'm doing trainings, I have a picture of a guy walking in like some shopping mall, and he's looking at his phone, and there's a fountain right in front of him, and he just looking at his phone, and he just falls over. He falls straight into the fountain. He doesn't even know the fountain's there. It's like completely not aware of his environment. That's the way we live most of the time in reaction. The phones are interesting because they're almost a metaphor for our automatic behavior, right? We're wired to a small thing, which is our automatic view of the world. If you can stop long enough to connect to the bigger picture, it's deeply satisfying and nourishing and rewarding. And so all the stuff that people are looking for, how can I be happier? I want to find a way to do, how can I be successful? It's not there. It's here. Always, it's here.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Brett, it's been wonderful. I loved the conversation the whole way through. How can people get in contact with you?
Languageofmindfulness.com is my website, and I do free coaching session to anybody who's interested, just to see if it's a good fit. And I have a ton of content there. I have my own podcast, Language of Mindfulness. You can find it anywhere just by typing in those words. And there's, again, the TEDx 101, which is available to anyone, which is languageofmindfulness.com/TEDx 101. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook and everywhere else that you can think of, Twitter at all. So I hope that people sign up for my newsletter at languageofmindfulness.com as well.
I'll put all the links on the description below. So
thank you so kindly. And just me to you, I really appreciate, the work that you're doing. And, I know that it hasn't, the way that you kind of decided, you just made a choice. I am going to set a course, was really interesting to me, because you kind of literally just changed your whole world. And that takes a lot of courage. And it tells me something about you that's that's very interesting and powerful, that you have something in you that's really powerfully committed to the truth and authenticity. And I just want to honor that and say thank you for that work.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. So that's all for the Speaking Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. We're on BitChute, a Speaking Podcast, and we're on YouTube. Until next week, take care.